Hey, my name is Yuvi and I am a tech writer working in AI cloud, and I want to talk about how to emotionally prepare for Git and GitHub if you're coming from Perforce and you're kind of a little nervous. This is just going to be a very high-level way to think about Git so that you're in the right mindset to start using it. I'm going to try to knock this out in under 10 minutes. First thing is, and the zeroth thing, I guess, is that Git and GitHub are two different things. Git is the name of the open source version control tool, and GitHub is the online service that you'll be using to manage and collaborate with others on your Git repository. Now, the first thing to know between Perforce and Git is that the architecture is quite a bit different in that Perforce is a centralized system. So there's one main location, a depot, a server, whatever, and you check stuff out of that and you check stuff into that. Git is distributed. So you end up having a whole repository in the cloud, managed by GitHub, and then you make a clone, a full copy of it into your local environment, and you work in that local environment, and when you feel like it, you push those changes out to the cloud and you collaborate there. But it's a distributed system, and that'll be important as you understand things a little bit better. Okay, the next thing to know is that the whole checkout process is quite a bit different. At the simplest level with Perforce, you check out files, then you make a bunch of changes, and then you check it back in. With Git, you make the changes, then you add and commit those changes. And so it's just a little bit of a different mindset there. Okay, another thing is you'll hear a lot about branches with Git. And branches you can think about as just pointers to a commit. And a commit is just like a little snapshot in time along the timeline of changes to your repository. With most repositories, there's a main branch, and that's often the branch that you might publish content from that main branch. But if you're working on a new feature and you're not ready yet to merge it onto that main branch, you might create a branch called whatever, named after your feature. And that's just a way you can kind of track those changes. You can delete a branch and you're not deleting any of the commits or the changes along the way. You're just deleting the pointer. So it's very lightweight to add and delete branches. Okay, now this is the meat of what I want to talk to about, is that the workflow is very different. I'm going to explain the workflow 3 times. Once, just going to explain it in words real quickly. Then I'm going to explain it with a few little simple pictures. Then I'm going to show you what it looks like in action. So let's go through it in words. I should clarify that there's many different types of workflows, but this is one of the more common workflows. So first thing you would do is get the latest changes from the remote repository up in GitHub. The first time you get the latest, you clone the repository. Once you've already cloned it, then you'll typically just pull the changes from that repository. Once you've got those changes locally, you typically create a branch and you add and commit your changes locally. When you're satisfied with your changes and you're ready for them to get reviewed, what you do is you push those changes up to GitHub so that you can collaborate on them. And that's where the review happens, and people can look at your changes, comment on them. You haven't put it onto the main branch. It's still in your special feature branch while y'all are collaborating. Once people approve your changes, you merge those changes in GitHub, and that's where you kind of merge them onto the main branch. And then you do a little cleanup locally so you can grab those changes back into your local environment. That's the basic workflow. Let me show it to you in pictures briefly. So, okay, let's say this is the origin repository up in GitHub, and you want to make a copy of this. So you will clone that, and now you have an exact copy of what's in that repository up in the cloud. Now you're ready to make changes. And so you usually create a feature branch and you add and commit changes to that branch. Next step is you push those changes up to GitHub. Now you're ready to collaborate with someone. So this is where reviews happen. People can suggest changes. You can incorporate those changes, and all back forth happens. Sometimes entirely in GitHub. Sometimes you actually bring it back down, make changes, and push it back up. But we're going to keep it simple. Let's assume you get your changes approved or you do some updates in GitHub. Now you're ready to merge those changes. So you merge what you've got in your feature branch with what was in the main branch, and now you have a new commit that incorporates all of that stuff. There's another concept called rebase where you kind of flatten the timeline rather than have this little tree structure, but we're going to stick to the simple merge that you see at the top here. Now you want to do some local cleanup, which basically means you pull those changes down from the origin repository and you delete your old branch, which again doesn't delete the commit, it just deletes the pointer. No big deal. And now you're ready to make the next change. So let me demo that process with a very simple example here. I'm going to demo this with GitHub Desktop, which is a UI that you can use to do some of these Git steps, even though usually I do it with a command line, but I thought maybe the UI might be a touch easier. First thing I need to do is pull down the changes from the remote repository into my local environment because, there's been changes since I've last done this. So you'll see here there's 2 commits from the origin remote repository. So I'm going to pull those down locally. Okay, so now I've got the latest. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a branch. So I'm going to make a new branch and call it, a lot of times we use our initials just so we can distinguish whose branch is whose. And I'm going to call it example workflow. Create the branch. Okay, now I'm going to make changes. So here's the README, and I'm going to change a super cool developer guide to a super duper cool developer guide. Pretty clever here. So I saved it. I'm going to go back to GitHub Desktop. So you can see my change here. And so now what I want to do is add and commit that change. So I'm just going to put a quick description here, which is made change for training video. And this, when I say commit, it's going to add and commit this file locally. Okay, now I've done all my local work. I'm going to push that change up to the remote repository. Now I'm going to go to GitHub to do the rest of this. So let's view it on GitHub. Okay, so you see, what I've done is I've pushed that branch with that commit up to the repository, and now what I need to do is make a pull request. Now the pull request is how you collaborate with other people. So made change for training video, and I can put more in this description, and you'll see down below, there's my change. So I can create a pull request. And now people can collaborate on it. You can add reviewers. They can look at this change and decide whether it's a good change. They can even suggest differences. Like I could say a super duper duper cool developer guide. And so if I've added a comment here, I could even commit those suggestions right here. But regardless, at some point, what you're going to want to do after it's been approved is you are going to merge that change. So I'm not going to really go through this, but here's where I would merge the changes, and that would update the main branch with these changes. Once I do that, I would come back to the GitHub Desktop and I would pull the latest changes from the remote repository, and that's the cycle. And you do that over and over and over and over again. Now, I don't want to talk about merge conflicts in this video, but that is a whole thing. And sometimes you can use AI to help you along the way. Once you understand Git, you can kind of understand why these merge conflicts occur and how to solve them. You can also use AI for any of this stuff nowadays. Sometimes, with Claude Code, I'll just say add, commit, push, and it can do all of that real quick for you. But it's still, I think, important to understand how Git works at a basic level, because AI can get you in just as much trouble, if not more trouble, than you can on your own. So sometimes it's useful just to understand the fundamentals, and that's why I kind of wanted to review these concepts. Hope that helped. Talk to you later.